morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Over the past 40 years, as Al started off by reminding us, leaders like Ronald Reagan have been here. He spoke at the very first conference's first meeting with less folks than are here today, have helped define our nation. He most of all, but others as well through 40 years have helped define our nation by laying out conservatives' bold agenda for America. They've done it over and over. They've done it time and again. And it's been at this conference where conservative leaders have discussed ways to end the threat of communism and to spread the principles of freedom throughout the world and to remind Americans of them. It isn't just that we need to spread those around the world. We need to remind our fellow Americans. It's one thing I call on my fellow conservatives to do all the time. Leaders have taken this stage to share their conviction that fiscal responsibility, personal accountability, protection of each individual's life and freedom, and a strong free market system are the foundations on which this country was built and became the greatest nation in the world. That if we want to expand opportunity and allow our children and grandchildren to live the American dream, then we must first be willing to defend the principles of this great experiment in American self-governance. So it's quite an honor to be the very first speaker at the 40th conference for the Conservative Political Action Conference, and I thank you all for the opportunity today. Growing up just across the Potomac River in Virginia, we're taught from a very young age the important role that the Commonwealth has played in American history and the establishment of this great nation. From the very first permanent settlement at Jamestown to achieving independence at Yorktown. We had declared it before. We achieved it at Yorktown, guaranteeing our independence. And from Virginians like George Washington and Patrick Henry and James Madison. Yet it was another Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the immortal words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We all know and are stirred by these words, but not too many people remember the very next phrase of the Declaration of Independence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So why are governments instituted? To secure the rights that God has bestowed on us. No more and no less. That's why we have government. While our most fundamental rights are given to each of us by God Himself, it's up to us to defend and preserve those rights for ourselves and for the generations to come. So today, what are we truly passing down to the next generation of Americans? For the first time in our nation's history, we cannot say that our children will, with certainty, have the opportunity to do better than we did. A mounting national debt threatens to drown our economy in uncertainty. And unelected bureaucrats in Washington are unbridled in their attempts to insert themselves into our economy and into our daily lives. The education we're giving many of our children does not adequately prepare them for the global economy in which we must compete. And far too many of our fellow citizens, and we all know some of these people, they sit quietly and passively by and watch the world crumble around them because they don't believe that they have a voice in our republic. If you walk outside and look just up the Potomac, you can see monuments in our nation's capital erected to honor those great men who came before us, who devoted their lives to defending our first principles. The future they left us is at risk, and our nation stands at a threshold. What type of country, what type of people do we want to be? For the past 3 years, I've had the great honor of serving as the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, during that time, I've taken on some important cases I was the first Attorney General in the country to sue to stop the implementation of the notorious federal health care law on the grounds the so-called Affordable Care Act will overstep the Constitution itself. Thank you. I successfully sued the EPA, or as I like to call it, the Employment Prevention Agency, when they try to treat rainwater like a pollutant, which would have cost the taxpayers of Virginia, and especially Fairfax County, right here in Northern Virginia, almost $300 million for one creek. It was an expensive creek. And it would have required the taking of homes, evicting people from their homes, taking their homes, and taking businesses to accomplish the EPA's goals. I fought to end the barbaric practice of human trafficking, one of the fastest growing crimes in the world. Forces too many women and children into deplorable servitude. It's one of the most inhumane things you can see, and it happens right here in this country. I fought for 8 long years to safeguard Virginia's property rights, one of our fundamental rights, by helping to pass a constitutional amendment that will dramatically curb the government's eminent domain power, so private land can no longer be taken by government from one private owner and given to another, taking from the weak and giving to the strong. That's what that protection is for. I'm happy to report it was approved by the people of Virginia this past November with 74% of the vote. When given a choice, the people of Virginia, regardless of political party, stood for our first principles, regardless of their party. I've also fought to protect the most innocent among us and defend our Constitution in its entirety. And for taking a stand on these most basic rights, the Democrats and their liberal allies, I'm sure it's no surprise to you, have labeled me as someone who must be defeated at all costs. At all costs. They will stop at nothing to make sure that I am not elected Virginia's next governor, because I have dared to defend our most sacred principles rather than bow to their vision of a new American future. When you become a candidate for public office, you never quite get used to what the pundits and political prognosticators say about you, or the barbs your opponents toss your way. I expect in the next few months I'm going to see a few more of those. But the one thing that even my staunchest opponents will admit is that I'm a straight shooter and that I'm a man of my word. And when this race is over, they'll still be able to say that. In every one of my campaigns, I've always laid out my agenda for what I intend to pursue, and when elected, I proceeded to do the unusual and actually pursue it. And there are 5 things that I'd like to do as governor. First, we need to simplify our tax code in a fair way that will increase our competitiveness in a global economy. Now, we have heard the word fair a lot in the last year, haven't we? Well, let me tell you what fair means to me. It starts by meaning getting rid of the special interest breaks that the well-connected have piled into our tax code. It starts with that. It means lower rates for ordinary, middle-class, hard-working Virginians and our businesses so they can decide what to do with their own money. It is their money, after all. Something that government forgets very often and that conservatives need to remind our fellow Americans about. We need to remind them that government takes money from the people. It isn't the government that has the right to that money. Second, I'll work from day one to streamline regulations and work to eliminate harmful and punitive government interference in the marketplace. This is one of the worst hidden attacks on our economy today. Our nation has always been successful when entrepreneurs are able to invest and create jobs. How many times have you heard business CEOs say today, gosh, I couldn't start my business today? Well, we need to move in the other direction. When government limits that opportunity or places unnecessary burdens on our small businesses, our economy becomes stagnant. As governor, I want to clear the way for those who expand our free market system so they can get about the business of doing business. As Attorney General, I've been a staunch opponent of illegal federal overreach of every kind and a defender of Virginia's right-to-work laws, and I'll continue to do that as governor. Right-to-work states have more job creation and more income growth. And do you know what else right-to-work states have? They have more freedom. They have more freedom. Conservatives need to remind America that not only do more regulations mean less jobs, more regulations mean less freedom, less liberty, and liberty matters. It matters. The third thing that I'll do as governor is work to rein in the government. Every year it seems that politicians talk about attacking waste, fraud, and abuse and wanting to run government more like a business. But how many of them have actually done it? How many of them have done it? Well, I have, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's just as Attorney General. As governor, I'll bring the same hard-nosed approach to controlling Virginia's budget and keeping it in balance. What a concept, huh? A balanced budget. What a concept. I suspect you'll hear more about that in the next couple of days here. Now, fourth, a quality education is the surest way to bring opportunity to every Virginian, and I believe it is unacceptable for a child to receive an education, a poor education, simply because of where they happen to live. No child should be forced to remain in a failing school. It condemns that child to mediocrity or worse. We need to give parents, the flexibility and tools they need to make the best educational choices for their child, for their children. We must work to keep a college education affordable to the middle class while also strengthening workforce development for people who aren't going to choose the college path or who are, frankly, in economic transition because of the dislocation in our economy. And fifth, becoming Virginia's governor allows someone the great honor of serving in the same office as Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry. But it also comes with great responsibility. The governor of Virginia must be willing to speak for those citizens who do not have a voice. As governor, I want to continue my efforts to protect our most vulnerable citizens, as I've done as Attorney General, and that's at every stage of life. And to crack down on predators who prey on our children online, I want to continue my efforts to stop human trafficking that forces too many women and children into sexual servitude. For most of my adult life, I've been an advocate for the mentally ill. People who, through no fault of their own, cannot help themselves. And as governor, I want to make it a priority for our state to become a leader in addressing this pressing need. I also want to continue to be a mighty voice for those who've been convicted of a crime but remain in prison because no one is willing to argue their innocence. And how many times have I seen my fellow tough-on-crime conservatives be not merely willing but excited to lock up every convict and throw away the key. If we really believe that no one is beyond redemption, we need to stop throwing away that key. We need to stop throwing away that key. Conservatives should lead the campaign to changing the culture of corrections in America. To me, serving as an advocate for those without a voice in our society would be one of the greatest honors of being governor. And what is the alternative? In my race, my Democratic opponent for governor, Terry McAuliffe, is an unabashed liberal. He served as chairman of the DNC, was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman in 2008, He's been a prolific fundraiser for the Democratic candidates and their liberal causes, and worked with Bill Clinton to rent out the Lincoln bedroom in the White House. We want to try to protect the Lafayette bedroom in Virginia from the same fate. For most of his political career, he's worked hand in hand with the national union bosses and the liberal elite, and stands with those who view power as being more important than principle. He believes the heavy hand of government must be involved in our daily lives, and that increased regulations are necessary for economic stability. Tells you where he looks for bringing stability to America. He believes that government is the solution for every problem facing our nation today, and then by expanding its power, which always comes at the expense of the citizens' power, we can have a different future. And well, that would lead to a very different future. But I have a very different view of America's future. I see a nation where our people are once again given the freedom to pursue and achieve the American dream, where hard work is rewarded and success is a good thing. Imagine that. Imagine that. Where our children are taught about American exceptionalism and strive to achieve, because that has always been part of this nation's destiny. A nation where we live within our means and pass on to the next generation a system of governance that preserves our freedoms and defends our God-given rights. This is a nation worthy of our history and of the sacrifices of those who've gone before us. And because of their sacrifices, we've been delivered the greatest nation in the history of the world. And we need to act like it. As conservatives, we need to preserve that history and share it articulately and aggressively with our fellow Americans. I hope that that's the kind of future we can work together as conservatives to build, not just in Virginia, but across America. Thank you all very much, and may God bless you, and may He continue to bless our constitutional republic. God bless you. Thank you all.